Yes. Okay. So if your biological information has been biometric, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Biometric information has been compromised. So what? I don't really know anything about this
Yeah.
area. What does that look like?
So my fingerprints, I look at 23andMe and the relationship with our biometric data. That's a perfect example of this. Um, Unfortunately, if my social security number becomes compromised, I can swap that out. I can contact the government and say, hey, my identity has been stolen. I need to replace this information. If my credit card information is on the black market, I can absolutely go to my bank and say, hey, my card's been compromised. There's fraud on my account. I need a new card. However, if my biometric information is compromised, there's nothing I can do about that. So, hi, my name is Jeremy Treadwell. I am a, creative, futurist, technologist, passionate about how humans intersect with technology and each other, and really working towards crafting a beautiful digital future. I see that technology is growing with us, growing faster than the human race can really evolve. And I'm seeing more and more of a fusion of the two. I'm not saying that I'm going to put the Google chip in my brain when it comes out, but I am saying that I can see AR, VR, and mixed realities becoming more and more of a thing, less and less integration and more driven towards connectivity for each other and relationships. And so, really, I'm just a nerdy guy, who has a dog and a wife and lives now in DC, and really just focused on how do we make this thing work? Like, how do we drive technology and human interaction and human relationships in a way that's meaningful, impactful, and that we can still have human connection through technology? So, if I could reimagine the future, I would jump to roughly 10, 15 years in the future when security and security mindfulness is at the top of everyone's mind, right? Being able to recognize threats, being able to have trust in certain environments, and understanding that there are going to be threats, but understanding also the same way we tell children, don't talk to strangers. When you get an unknown email, an unknown instant message, an unknown correspondence, you have the skills to be able to understand, is this from a trusted source, or is this something I need to be mindful of? But I will say that due to economies of scale and the way that businesses are done now, and the way that data is collected primarily, and the way the laws are written around privacy and ownership more specifically, it does make it more difficult for that transaction to happen, right? Because I have a background in product development and digital transformations, I see a lot of what we discuss as friction points in the customer to business relationship. And so understanding that we live in a convenience culture. Right now, consumers are more than happy to provide information in order to achieve a quick solution, access to a system, access to a product, things of that nature. And so the progression that we will need to make is that trade-off would need to be compromised. Consumers need to better understand the leverage that they're providing in companies and giving them this information, and companies need to understand how to secure and protect the information that consumers give them. So it is a bilateral relationship, but I think in the next 10 to 15 years, we can expect to see a shift in that marketplace and a shift in the ownership of that data, and consumers being more intelligent about the data they're acquiescing, but also understanding the data that has value versus the data that is needed to provide in order to get access to a program or a platform. As a developer, I've seen companies, collect data. As a consumer, I've provided information in order to get access to a service. Oh, free month, just give us your credit card information. Oh, get free 6 months, just give us your car VIN number. Like, oh, you get all these things if you provide us information, right? So as I look at it as both a developer, as a human computer systems developer, right? I look at these things and I'm looking at the information that companies are collecting. And sometimes they're superfluous, but oftentimes it is actually necessary to provide a valuable service to the consumer. So I literally have seen both sides of this coin. And I think that what we aren't focusing on is the coin itself, the data itself, the ability to collect several pieces of data, to put them through an algorithm, to pass it through machine learning, and then to be able to understand not just one person, but to understand a subset of people or a ton of information very, very quickly, looking at how it all works together. And to the biometrics point more specifically, there was a lawsuit recently. Facebook faced a lawsuit in Illinois, which they tried to get out of, But the primary concern there is that Illinois has a law that states that companies cannot store consumers' biometric information. In other words, they have the Face ID. Everyone uses this feature. If you upload a photo to Facebook, it'll suggest, oh, who's in this photo? That is Facebook actively storing and recognizing photos. So that is an algorithmic product that they have built in order to recognize and identify people in photos, and then to be able to suggest who is in that photo. Over time, they have amassed billions of information on their online platform. And we're not saying this data is not secure. At the same time, they faced a lawsuit in Illinois because the Illinois law protects those in Illinois from having their biometric information stored in an online format. And once again, if a threat actor were to gain access to the algorithm, what else could they possibly do with having, maybe 2-3 million individuals' facial biometrics? So there's things to consider. There's beautiful parts of the project, right? That I love using that feature on Facebook. I think we all enjoy the ease and the comfort. Oh, is this your mother? Oh, is this your brother? You can easily tag them in the photo. But at what cost does that come, right? And ensuring that that data is secure and safe, and that users are aware of the privilege that they have and that the data that they're giving to these, corporations. And how do we regulate that balance and that trade from information to products and services? And how does that, kind of shift in the next 10 to 15 years? And that's really that piece that I'm most interested in as we grow and as new, regulation comes out, as, there's a ton of talk around cyber warfare and all these other components with governments and whatnot. So there is a lot at stake, but I'm really optimistic about the future of data because we have a number of, legislation on the books. We have a number of activist groups talking about their data and data ownership and really understanding what are we as consumers acquiescing and as a business to ask, is the information that we're collecting pertinent to providing a valuable service to our consumers?
Great. So there's two topics I think that come up when you're speaking to all of this that I'm super curious about. The first one, right, when it comes to collecting data, that I personally struggle with, it can sometimes be, it's like you're on a track, right? And if data is helping you to optimize that path, great. But the problem, or for me, a concern that comes up is, what if we're on the wrong path? So we're optimizing certain behavior that we don't want to be feeding anymore, that actually is leading to some bad habits, to some to more depression, to anxiety statistics, right? All of these other things. So when it comes to businesses collecting information, what is your perspective on how they can use that information more responsibly, not just from protecting the consumer, but also as a conscious creator of product value?
Man, so you have tapped on a whole repository of information in my head. So how organizations, businesses, et cetera, can be responsible, can be a part of that conversation for creating healthy habits for their consumers, all starts with what they call in the industry dark patterns. And dark patterns are a design, an engagement from the standpoint of a design within the product that encourages users to use the product more often, to accept features that they may not accept, or to provide information they may not ordinarily provide. So dark patterns within the industry are defined as pretty much goading the user to do something they wouldn't ordinarily do, or that may not be in their best interest. And so there are tons of examples of these around the industry, but the key point there is that there is more and more legislation specifically targeting dark patterns. Recently, there was a Algorithmic Accountability Act that's being in place. I think Cory Booker is one of the leading senators on that piece. And I think it's really important to call out that within that act, they are targeting and saying that dark patterns within products, digital products specifically, are not inconsistent with protecting the consumer. So there's starting to be more and more legislation. Consumers are starting to be more and more vigilant around reading the terms and conditions. One example of this would be a Face app recently This face app allows you to age yourself. You can provide any photo you like, and it would age you 20, 30, 50 years. You can see what you look like, in 50 years, which is a beautiful concept. A beautiful concept. But then recently it broke in the news that within the terms and conditions, that whatever photo you provided that, used their algorithmics in order to produce the older photo, that the organization that owned that app could then use that photo in any way they saw like to in perpetuity forever. So celebrities and just influencers online, or just lay people, everyday people, started to see, wait a minute, why am I providing free advertising to this, right, or allowing them to use my photo in any way they would like, right? So there's more and more conscientiousness growing in the space of personal identity and digital identity, and really creating a security culture. I think that's the way I try to look at it, because if that's become imbued in our culture, more and more people will start to read the terms and conditions, start to understand the products, right? But really, the answer to your question around the organization's responsibility of, one, looking at what are the patterns that they're driving, and then two, looking at the data that they are collecting and the impact that it has on their consumers. It really starts with two things, right? The business has a responsibility to what? Make money. They're growing their organization, they're growing their user base. One of the metrics I often look at as a product owner is DAU, daily active users, right? How are we ensuring that users are constantly in the app, using it, getting value from it, enjoying it, to the point of it becoming habitual, right? And there are several books that you find out now about Hooked, and the Hooked model, and the variable reward, the Pavlov's dogs model, right? The concept where if you do something repetitively and you provide incentive and you provide value, then users will consistently come back and seek that same dopamine release from that same thing. So that's the exact same reason when your phone buzzes or chimes or dings, whatever, you look at it. You want to see what it is. It's a dopamine release. You enjoy, it can be great news, it can be bad news, it can be, just something else Trump has said on Twitter. It's the idea that we enjoy that release that comes from that trigger of the cell phone buzz to the reward after completing the requested action of us, right? And even if there's no additional action, it's just the fact that we're logging into our phone, we're accessing that information, we're seeing, oh, who texted me, who sent me this information, who called me. Those are great examples of the habitual pattern that companies look for, that product owners, like, even like myself, as organizations do. We want, you want to use the product, but at the same time, as consumers, we have to also be vigilant to understand what cost is that giving us. So when you talk about depression, when you talk about all the mental health that goes into it, there is a growing emerging field called captology that talks about technology as persuasive. So it's implying the idea that technology in and of itself, regardless of what is displayed through it, is addictive itself. And a very long time ago, in a media studies course in college, we learned about Marshall McLuhan, who was a media theorist in the early 60s, late 70s. And one of his, famous books was called The Medium is the Message. And one of the clips, I've watched a few of his interviews, and he's talking about, it doesn't matter what's on the TV screen. This is before cell phones were really a thing, before, the internet age as we know of it now, Industry 4.0, right? He was just simply stating that the medium, the way that you spread this through technology, impacts the message significantly. Within the captology field, looks at technology as a persuasive force. And how is it changing human behavior? How is it changing the way we interact with one another? And how is it shifting the way that we think? More importantly, how does it limit our thought, our ability for deep thought? When you look at attention spans for each generation, they're more adept to technology, but there's also been research that's highlighting the fact that there's less and less of an attention span. Twitter is 140 characters. Like, the whole idea is that we're getting short bursts of information, but how much room are we leaving for deep intellectual thought? And I think that's the balance we have to attribute to how technology, captology, and the responsibility that corporations play in evolving and shaping the human and how we interact with one another, and also how we interact with technology.
Absolutely.
You can feel free to edit that out. That was a whole lot. I just...
Tell me, I can get a feel for what you're passionate about, but if you can tell me strengths, you know, what you love, what your perspective is, and what you're working on right now.
I guess because of my futurist background and because, you know, I come from a background of entrepreneurs, I come from a background of really just diving into new technology. And, you know, I'm an optimist. I immediately see the opportunity, and that may be the consulting training in me as well. I look for solutions. I look for how do we drive, you know, meaningful insight from data, and how do we start to look at how do we make problems disappear and make opportunities appear so that people can connect more readily and easier.
Wonderful. Great. And can you tell me a little bit about what projects you're working on right now? I know you have got your business, so just kind of give us a little overview.
So Treadwell Agency is my company. Our firm is growing. We started in digital transformation, product. I'm a big product and customer experience, CX person. I really look closely at the relationship between the organization, the product, the business, and also how the technology drives towards the intended goal for the business, right? Whether it be revenue, whether it be active users, whatever that metric may be, I'm looking at how do we move this along and reduce friction along the way. So, but within that, my wife is kind of firmly rooted in cybersecurity, and so we've started to talk more and more about privacy, talk more about data and its value in this next in this next kind of technological innovation cycle. And so we're starting to move our company towards, you know, helping organizations strategically think through how to be more impactful and how to be more secure and how to, you know, really engage and educate their consumers on their privacy, on their education, on their information, so to speak, and how to manage that relationship and how to really be proactive in the security and privacy of their organization.
How can we help? What are you looking for right now?
So I am looking for really just people to be vigilant, to be aware of the impact of the security and to be aware of the information that they're providing, right? If you're traveling or if you're filling out a form and someone asks you to write down your social security number, instead of writing it down as though it's on a paper record that by law they have to retain for a certain amount of time, which could be accessed by someone unknowingly, ask them if they can manually enter it into the system, right? There's things that we can do, not just all digitally and on your phone, on your app, but there's things even with paperwork, being aware of what you're providing and to whom, and asking the question, how is this being stored? And how is this being calculated? How is this being integrated with other data? So I'm specifically looking for people, and part of our company's, you know, key goal in 2020 and beyond is really to start asking that question and start to educate consumers on the best way to be vigilant about their information. And we're asking companies and organizations, you know, as I work with different consulting firms and different organizations, I'm starting to raise that question when I'm developing products. How are we securing the consumer's data? And what data are we collecting? And is that truly pertinent, right? And asking the question about compliance. Are organizations complying with GDPR and CCPA? And beyond compliance, are there ways that we can raise the bar and really give consumers access to owning their data versus the privacy of ensuring that the organization is keeping it secure?
Definitely. And how, you know, it's so hard for consumers. I know you're doing all this education. I mean, again, such an important space to be in right now. And as you know, obviously, I'm a prime example. Like, I'm horrible at protecting my security just because it's not what's front of mind all day, even though I don't like it, right? I'm like, I don't like people taking my information. I'm very concerned. I have a lot of opinions about it. And yet I fill out a form and go through, and like the terms and conditions comes up, and I'm like, that's the longest document I've ever seen in my entire life. I am not taking an hour. So where do you see, you know, how can we make it a little bit, if there were, you know, 3 steps or just little things that we could do? I love this. Write it on, ask to have your security number put directly into a system. If there are other little things like that as consumers that we can, without, I don't know, just some thoughts that come to mind, you know, for you in this space, how we can start to grow our mindfulness and
absolutely
from organizations.
Absolutely. So, okay. With digital products, it's harder, right? The terms and conditions are kind of all or nothing. I can't go to Facebook and redline their terms and terms and conditions and have them respond to me in a timely fashion and say, okay, we'll modify these things for you to accept, right? So that's a longer term conversation, right? For digital products, but very very much in the short term, emails. If you have an unknown email that you don't know who it came from with a link, possibly from a Nigerian king asking you to donate, saying they want to give you $1 million if you do this one small thing for them and click this link to learn more. That is a perfect example, right? Send that email to spam, notify, your email provider that it's a phishing attempt, right? If you get a phone call from an unknown number, I'm not saying it's not okay to answer it, but when you answer the call, maybe say hello once, maybe twice. But also just keep in mind that conversation, even though if the person doesn't say anything back, that could be recorded. And that recording could be played back. So if you answer the phone, hey, my name is Jeremy Treadwell, like you start engaging in conversation or continue your other, say other things on that open line, that can be recorded. Another example could be if you're on hold or on the phone with telecoms or whatever provider you're on hold with, you may hear music, but keep in mind, they may still be recording even though you're on hold with them. So they can hear you, but you can't hear them. So be mindful of what you're saying, if you're saying anything at all while you're on hold. So maybe mute your phone more proactively, right? There's tons of very, very small things that we can do. I've seen a report recently that your iPhone will upload information all through the night. One great example would be of a great way to stop that process would be to turn the phone off or turn off the internet access on your phone so that it can't be sending and receiving data from the internet all while you're asleep, right? So there are and that's just a few. I'm gonna keep it short, but that's just a few of the very simple things that we can do day in and day out. Oh, the camera in your laptop, get a cover for that. You can use a Band-Aid, you can use a piece of tape. Amazon sells these little gadgets that slide back and forth. Keep that covered because you never know who can access that. And a lot of times people say, oh, the light will come on if it's being accessed. There are ways to access it without the light coming on. So there are things that we can do, just simple things to protect our privacy, to really be proactive. And like you said, the longer conversations I think are coming with the laws and different things and different policy and that's coming into place. And each state has their own kind of regulations, of course, and of course GDPR. So the European Union has a lot more access to the data than we do in the United States at this time. But my understanding is that there are talks of a federal privacy law as well. I know there's a lot of bureaucracy and hand holding that goes with that process, but the simple things that we can do in the now is be mindful, be aware of the fact that someone may be listening, someone may be a part of that conversation. Your information is being collected, it is being recorded. That way, if you're mindful of these things, you can take more precautions about what you say and what you do and who you give your information to.
Great. Okay, well, let's dive into our kind of a little bit more of the philosophical time, and we'll try to keep it a little bit concise. But I'm just going to hit, instead of going through all of them, my first question is always, so for you generally in life, how much control do you think we have over our lives? Nature, nurture, how much is hardwired, how much is flexible?
Gosh, this is a tough question. I always preface things with, as a Christian, I do believe that, the God that I serve has an amazing plan for my life. And that's better than anything that I could craft for myself, right? Ephesians 3:20 talks about God being able to do more than I could even think of, right? So there's things in that nature. So to answer your question, I'm trying to put a percentage around it because I'm a numbers guy. So it's kind of like 70-30. 70% is in my control because, in Romans it talks about faith without works is dead. Right. And so there's this notion that I can have faith all I want, that the sky will be purple and there's nothing I can do about it. But until I go to space with some purple dye and squirt it into the sky, it won't be purple. So I have to get to space with purple dye in order to make the sky purple. Even though I have faith for it to happen, I have to do work to make it happen as well. And so that is the way I look at it. Nature, of course, our genetics, things of that nature. I suddenly, won't shift and morph into a cat, right? So there's some elements of the laws of physics and the laws of nature and common sense laws as well. But I do truly believe that if there's anything you want to accomplish, if there's anything you want to do, there is no reason for you not to try, for you to put all of your efforts and resources into doing so. There are countless stories in the Bible and in my own life of people pretty much doing the impossible, the whole David and Goliath scenario, right? There's nothing you can't, do or situation you can't surmount if you have the willingness to go after it, to be prepared, right? And to also really take the steps to try to be successful. Yeah. And even if you aren't successful, try and try again. There's nothing wrong with, repeated efforts. I do believe in failing fast. And so if I'm going to try something, I'm going to try it wholeheartedly, give it my very, very best effort. And if it doesn't work, I know now I can shift my approach, I can shift my angle, or I can move on to something entirely different. Or a lot of times, even in my own career, I attempted something, it didn't work out the way I wanted, but in the midst of that, I learned something I would have never learned otherwise. And it enlightened me to a whole new scenario that I saw way more opportunity in than the initial opportunity that I sought, right? So I do think that our experiences can guide us and teach us. And whether you're a person of faith or not, there's still a whole universe behind you and circumstantial, like the relationships and things that happen. I don't believe they're by accident. And those connections may not last forever, but it is important to go through that process because you'll learn something. Something will make an imprint on your life. And so nature versus nurture, I personally think is going to have to be hard work and effort.
Hard work and effort first. Yeah. And as you said, I mean, I love and look a lot at if you have an impulse to do something, if you really feel a drive or a need, do it, but don't do it with the expectation that that's necessarily going to be the right thing. It's just, I love what you said, give it your all and then learn from it, because we get these little lessons that all of a sudden can take us, might be 5 failures, but we would have hated those 5 outcomes. They were meant to kind of build into, another direction. So it's never, I just wish we could erase the word failure from our vocabulary completely, but maybe.
Yeah. No, I think failure, and I've seen a great definition of this online. You only fail if you stop trying, if you just quit, right? Failure to me is in motion. Like it's never a static point. It's more of a continuation of the journey, right? There's constant evidence that if momentum is really what does everything, right? Consistency, momentum, progress, all of these words, passion, really should be our focus, not failure, right? Failure implies you stopped, you let go, you gave up the ghost. Now, that failure doesn't take into account for evolution. Failure doesn't take into account for learnings and previous experiences. Failure does not take in the account of wisdom of, wise counsel and mentors and things of that nature, or a coach for that matter. You're right. We should just do away with failure entirely and really focus on how have you grown? What have you learned? How was your walk? It's a walk. It's not a run. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Everything should be looked at for the length of our lives. What are you seeking to accomplish and how are you going about doing that? And what have you learned along the way?
Exactly. Awesome. Okay, next one. We kind of covered this. Oh no, this is actually just more just generally. So for you, when it comes to change, if people, where for you personally does change begin?
Ooh, change begins for me. It is truly all about passion. I am what I call a life hacker, and I enjoy methodology. I enjoy process. And so I am constantly looking for change. I'm constantly employing change, and I'm constantly begging my clients to change. And that's what consulting is all about, right? That's what, entrepreneurship is all about. It's employing change, right? As an entrepreneur, I have a responsibility to have change in the driver's seat, the passenger seat, however you want to put it, right? It's the idea that this thing is constantly with me. And if change ever leaves me, then I have left my purpose, right? Part of my mandate is to build. Build is change. Growth is change. So the idea that change, is constant. The idea that change needs to be with you at all times. And I will state that not everyone has the futurist or optimistic mindset. Not everyone, employs change and embraces change the way I do. And so part of my responsibility, as a consultant, as a futurist, as a person, as a human being, on this planet, is to help persuade, to help inform of the benefits and the value. And there is something to be said that while change is constant, not all change is good, right? I like the idea. Acceleration is a word that I love to bring into this scenario. People think acceleration is specifically going faster. I'm going from 50 miles an hour to 65 miles an hour while I'm driving my car. That is acceleration. No, acceleration is any change in the motion. Whether I'm turning left, right, I'm slowing down, I'm speeding up, any shift whatsoever is acceleration. And so I like to look at change as an acceleration or accelerant. The way it's purposefully driven is the idea that I can change by slowing down. I can change by pivoting in my business. And so people don't often think of change in that way. But whenever this conversation comes up, people talk about, change, and it's so dramatic, and change management, and all these, kind of hesitation that people have around change often bring, acceleration into that conversation. And you can accelerate, you can change your business for the better, right? Using the idea that acceleration can be pivoting, can be shifting lanes, can be slowing down. There are a lot of things that can be done to change for the better. And of course, there's also a lot of things can be done to change for the worse. But it's all about being mindful and being aware of the changes you're implementing. And I think that is the key to really having, and embracing change, especially for the future, the next Industry 4.0 and all the things that we're seeing. Change is going to be a constant. So how do you manage that?
Exactly. Exactly. And what I'm hearing, another really big shift, just to kind of reiterate in another way, is that when we think acceleration, or when companies and people are looking at change, they're oftentimes looking at it, we're still stuck in a very linear idea of change. Mm-hmm. Whereas change is more like water, right? It's like constantly taking shift, and it's becoming whatever it needs to be depending on the situation. And that might be deeper, that might be wider, that might, might be over here. And so I think it's like it's tough because most of our culture is built, all of our stories are linear.
Yes.
So we're stuck in that way of looking at life generally. And when we can release ourselves from that, and in how fast we're evolving right now, we're going to need to, because it screws with our head. All of a sudden, change is good, but you're going over this way, and you're like, but I'm not going forward. I'm not
exactly.
And then people freak out, and it's like, but you are.
Right. So, okay, what you just said made me think about a little bit more of customer experience. So CX, growing field, it really kind of birthed out of understanding how users feel in a given system. Typically, that system is linear. And I think that's why I love like design thinking or strategic thinking, and really looking at, I'm going to ramble off some words here, patient experience for, hospitals, right? Employee experience. How are you treating and how you engage in your employees? Citizen experience is coming up with governments and how they relate to the people that they are serving, right? So there's a number, and of course, customer experience. How do you engage and connect with customers? So within that change, fluidity that we've been discussing, there's this idea that there is a strategic point in which organizations do need to take 10 steps back and look at a journey map, look at how customers, patients, citizens, employees are all engaging in this system and this platform. And as the organization is strategically planning their change, they should start to get a bird's eye view of what are the potential pain points, what are the potential downfalls of this system and this platform, and how do we start to shift and minimize these pain points using that strategic thought process and going through this change, right? So there's a number of pieces that go along with this change, and really strategic thinking is number one. All organizations, really have to stop and look at how will people engage with this current system and this new system, and then how do you start to manage that middle and that transition?
Definitely. Great. And your personal how do you feel, all this change, right? We're talking about AI or artificial intelligence or becoming more machine,
Right?
this tech future. What for you is like at all costs, I think that we should guard, you know, X, or I really want this part of life. Not that everything's always in transformation, but what do you think we should really focus on that's going to kind of anchor us as all of these changes, as all these external things are moving around, right? What should anchor those decisions for you?
So for me, I'm actually seeing evidence of this through the economies that we're dealing with. It's all about human relationship, right? The nature of work is humans working together, right? And the nature of technology is shortening that distance, right? The idea that you and I can have this conversation now and record this and share this is all about human connection. People aren't um, looking for AI to solve, the relationships, right? Or to be in a relationship with them sometimes. But the point of this is all about human relationships and working together to achieve a goal, right? The idea that ideas start as seeds and become forests, right? And I love that analogy for technology because we have to start looking at technology as a tool that serves the human race, that serves us in a way of helping us simplify repeatable tasks, helping us to minimize the space and time related necessary to manage relationships. So the constant is really human life.
Well, yeah, I completely agree, but I hope we hold on to that. Like we're designing all the rest of this for humans to
Yes,
have more beautiful lives.
exactly.
Did lives. Let's not forget that.
Exactly. And I think that's right. I think we look at technology now as this whole ecosystem that's separate, from the human race. And I have earbuds in my ear that stay there constantly. And we have to be mindful of when to engage with technology and and to leverage that for relationships. But we also need to know when to step back from technology and really engage with those people that are in our lives on a day-to-day basis. Um, the way I like to look at it and to simplify here, there's a key difference between information and wisdom and knowledge and wisdom, right? Information is like one or two pieces. Um, Knowledge is having like a body of knowledge, like a lake or an ocean, right? And wisdom is like a huge mass of space and the ability to apply that information and that knowledge meaningfully and applicably to a situation.
Great. Okay, on that note, final words. What would you
Uh-oh.
leave behind today if there was a mantra, a quote, something that you just feel is relevant at this point in time?
Oh my gosh. Hold on. I'm going to pull it up. Okay. So there's a quote by James Allen. He's an author and he really has impacted me. There's a quote in one of his books that impacts everything I do, from my passions to what I pursue. And that quote is: think strongly, attempt fearlessly, and accomplish masterfully. These three quote, I mean, this one quote really has three nuggets that I try to make sure that I live by. You have to think strongly. I'm a strong proponent of individual thought, group thought, collecting others, having accountability partners, and coaching others to really think about situations, to assess everything in your brain, and to collect information in order to do so, to attempt fearlessly. And that to me really stands for give it your all, drive into everything that you want and that you're passionate about with purpose and precision and the ability to say, I'm going to do this fearlessly and not let anything impede you from making progress, and accomplish masterfully. The idea that when you accomplish something, you should revel in the mastery of it. The idea that it takes 10,000 hours to, master a new task, right? The idea that everything that you set your mind up to accomplish, you should ultimately be a master at. And that truly just stands for standing in excellence, working diligently to accomplish that goal, and really allowing yourself to feel everything associated with that in order for you to truly be your most authentic self, but also be your best self while you do it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for doing this today. It was so much fun to have you. Got my